The reason we're here today is, that probably everybody here knows, is for Ian Bath. Without Ian Bath, we wouldn't have what we have. 145 kilometres of an absolutely amazing amenity. He had a vision 50 years ago, and he got with a group of people, he got together and he worked the length of the canal, getting committees up and running, getting volunteers to work, clear the banks of the canal, and set up lock gate production, and got it where it is today. And to give you an idea of what Ian Bath was about, I'm going to call on Noel Spain, who knew and worked with Ian, to say a few words about him.
Invited guests, members of the Royal Canal Amenity Group, members of Inland Waterways Association of Ireland, our good friends and colleagues in Waterways Ireland, ladies and gentlemen. It's my pleasure to say a few words today about this gentleman. This welcome, first of all, to the Royal Canal, right behind you here, a 90-mile waterway, man-made waterway linking the River Liffey with the River Shannon, that served as a vital transport hub for almost 175 years, until 1951, when the last trader ceased trading on the canal. The canal itself was left derelict, unused the last 10 years, with one exception. There was one boat went through in 1954 called the Hark. It was Alt Delaney's launch of his boat through the canal, and we believe that was the final official boat to transmit the canal on the Royal. So the canal laid empty, dying, unused, in fact left as dead, the end of the Royal Canal. But not so, because in the mid-60s, a gentleman, and I do mean a gentleman, by the name of Ian Bath. Now, Ian was born in London, educated in Queen's in Belfast. After graduation, he met his wife Jean in Belfast. After graduation, he moved to Bradford in England, and later on, him and his family, two girls, Caroline and, what's it, Kathy? Jackie. Sorry, Jackie. Sorry, Jackie. And they moved to Dublin, out to Foxrock. Later on, they moved here to Castleknock, not too far from here at all. And it was then that Ian, on his travels, his evening walks around the area, discovered this canal. When he thought, is there a canal at all? It's empty, it's dry, and he just thought, well, something should be done about that. But it wasn't up to him, he thought. So Ian left things so, but some days afterwards, he's in Dublin City, browsing through a bookshop, when he came across a book on waterways, Green and Silver. The Green and Silver had been printed in 1979, and he was very impressed in what was in it. It became eventually, you might say, the gospel of waterways enthusiasts all over the country. So Ian came back, studying the book, and was hooked. He decided to start off looking westward on various places along the canal and enjoying himself. But he still felt that this canal should be done about it. Some days afterwards, he read an article in the Irish Times. The article was about a meeting that was to be held in Maynooth College, way out there, and it was to discuss the possible future of the Royal Canal. Ian said, okay, I think I'll attend there, and off he goes to hear about this restoration programme. But disillusioned, because while speakers talked in terms of restoring sections of the canal for angling or for canoeing and the likes, there was no mention of through navigation at all. There wasn't even a mention of the Dublin section of the canal. It wasn't even on the agenda. So Ian coming back disillusioned and says, I've got to do something. So he writes to the Inland Waterways Association of Ireland to see they might be the ones who do something about this Royal Canal. He's invited to attend a meeting of the group, the Dublin branch, and he puts forward his thoughts on the canal. But again here he meets with a bit of obstruction because IWAI were already involved in the restoration or ensuring that the Grand Canal didn't go the same path as the Royal Canal. So they weren't too keen to take on two tasks at the one time. They just felt that we could do one. But we did have one person on his side, and that was the chairperson, Ruth Delaney. Ruth saw Ian's point of view, and they agreed then that they would set up a subcommittee of the Inland Waterways Association to ensure or to press local authorities to do nothing with the canal that would end its life, that going forward something might be done at some stage. But Ian still hasn't got anything about a restoration. So home he comes and decides, I'll test the waters myself. I'll call a meeting. So he called a meeting in Coolmont Community School, just a few kilometres up the canal here. He called a meeting on the 4th of February 1974. That meeting was more positive, and those who attended felt that what Ian had in mind was a good idea. So they decided at that meeting that they would come down here to Talbot Bridge a few days afterwards and do a recce. The recce was to go from here to Clonsilla to see what might be done about restoring the canal. They got as far as the lock here to discover that the canal was dry. There was a small stream running through it, but the bed was dry, the overgrowth everywhere. So they thought, well, that's not looking good. So we'll head on for Clonsilla. But they could get no further. This section of canal between here and Granard Bridge was completely overgrown with briars, brambles, the whole lot. They had to actually get onto the bed of the dry canal to get from here to Granard Bridge before regaining the towpath beyond the bridge. They then go with single file from that up through the deep sinking, hacking their way through growth, and they got to Kennan Bridge on the Porterstown Road. And here, stop again. No way through, completely blocked. So they had to trespass onto the railway line to get to their destination at Clonsilla, where they got their transport back to base. They then decided, okay, we'll get a voluntary group, volunteers out the following Saturday and see if we can do anything with this overgrowth. So the following Saturday, a group of volunteers gathered their secateurs, slash hooks, anything they could get that would clear away this growth. They started off clearing off this overgrowth on this section here, right beyond the bridge, as far as Granard Bridge. And after that, they retired down to a pub just down the road here, the Twin Oaks, for refreshments. Well, now I don't know whether the refreshments were coffees or teas, but they did have refreshments. And they then had an impromptu business meeting there and then. And on the suggestion of an Ian Bain, they decided to call the group the Royal Canal Amenity Group. Thanks, Matt. Well done there. Ian was made chairman of the group. Mr. Bain was made secretary, and a man called Brian Thornbury was made treasurer. Thus, this work to start off the Royal Canal restoration begun. Now, in the meantime, let me see now where I've gone very far there, look at me up. That's a dead one. And this one here is a dead one. Thanks, Michelle. Now, having done the clearing of the towpath here, not long after, along came another gentleman, this time from Kinvara Park, a man called Eddie Slane. Now, Eddie got to work with the work parties for several weeks, and then suggested to Ian that if they moved down to Ashtown, he could muster a lot of local support for the work at the Ashtown area. So that was agreed. They went down to Ashtown, and right enough, true to his word, Eddie's team turned up, brought along the ladders, dropped the ladders into the chamber, climbed down, and with buckets and ropes started off clearing out the rubble from the chamber. And at the same time, both sides of the lock at Ashtown were completely empty, but full of rubbish. Abandoned cars were the biggest problem. And Ian had arranged with Dublin County Council that they would provide a tractor and a truck to haul these cars out of the canal. And they did just that. And the task was to bring these cars, the first two were loaded onto the truck to go to Dunsink, and I was asked would I accompany the driver down to Dunsink. Ian gave me a couple of pounds to cover the cost of the dumping. We get to Dunsink tip head, and the security man says, "Hi guys, what have we got here?" And we said, "Well, we got these cars from the Royal Canal. We have a restoration group formed now. What's the cost, please?" And I'll always remember his words. He says, "We should be paying you guys, not you paying us. In you go." And from that day onwards, the Dunsink tip head became our spot where we could dump all our rubbish. That was Ian's style, right? In the meantime, having cleared up here, the task they found was how, if we don't have water in the canal, we get nowhere. So Ian again gets in touch with, yes please, gets in touch with Fingal County Council, with CIE, sorry. And they agreed that if they were to sabotage the lower gates here of the 12th lock, they could then put those into the upper gates to hold the water back. And that was done. And then this stream that was running through eventually started filling the canal. And lo and behold, we have a 7.5 mile stretch of canal between here and Leixlip in operation. And that was an eye-opener to the locality. People suddenly realised what this team are doing is achievable. We can do it, right? So then they were offered 2 boats by Board Falta, and they started off running day trips to fundraise along that stretch of the canal, just up the road there, right? Or up the water there, right? And fine, they have water in it. And now the question is, we have to advance further. The 13th lock out beyond Leixlip would need to be repaired the same way. And CIE agreed that if the group could provide the lock gates, they would fit them. So IWAI and RCAG got together out into Lucan Tech and arranged with Lucan Tech that they would make a gate for the 13th lock. They did just that, they made the gate for the 13th lock. And the gates were fitted, and lo and behold, we have water as far as Maynooth, right? And again, eyes open there. Now let me see how, I don't want to go too far ahead of myself here, right? Now, then going back to Dublin here, we had Dublin Corporation said they would do a part grant if the group could provide lock gates for the 3rd lock down behind Mountjoy Prison. Now this was big because here we are, a voluntary group, volunteers being asked to make lock gates for the canal. No experience whatsoever. But Ian was up to the challenge. He wasn't saying no. So the task they were faced with was they'd have to provide premises, they'd have to provide a foreman, they'd have to provide the material for this work, and they'd have to provide the manpower. Well, the manpower was easy because it came through an ANCO training scheme. ANCO readily jumped to this idea of having their trainees trained at Lockgate. And then they managed to secure premises from Guinness Brewery in Watling Street to start making gates. Now that group of Ians made 13 sets of gates from the first gate down at Newcomer Bridge to the 17th lock beyond Kilcock, out of Watling Street. And not alone that, they also did 6 gates for the branch line into Naas on the Grand Canal. So that's how well they were getting on in that case, right? Now, how have we got to now? We got the lock gates fixed, do we? Now, fundraising would have been the biggest event of the whole lot. We need to have a lot of fundraising to meet up to this cost. And they had cheese and wine sessions up in the Church of Ireland Hall here in Castleknock. They had cake sales down the Nappin Road. They had raffles, and again the Bowl Eddie Slane, the challenges to him were no bother at all. He even organised packed out concerts in the National Concert Hall to fundraise. At the same time, a group of lads up in Athlone branch of the IWAI, they were also fundraising. Raffles, not for boxes of chocolates, mind you, cars, Toyota cars. That's what they were raffling for fundraising for the Royal Canal. And as well as that, they decided to reprint the book Green and Silver that I mentioned before, and the profits from that went to the Royal Canal. Thank you Athlone for that, because their contribution was absolutely massive, it was, right? And now, just worthwhile mentioning that when they opened the Lockgate manufacturing plant in Watling Street, the official inauguration of that was performed by the Taoiseach Albert Reynolds on that occasion. So Ian has pull now with top brass in government of the day. Doing very, very well. Now, in the late 80s, or late 70s in fact, government realising what the Royal Canal Amenity Group were achieving, agreed that they would transfer ownership from the CIA to OPW. That was late 79. It took until 1980 before that was achieved, right? So 1980, we got the Royal Canal up as far as that stage, right? At that time, another gentleman came on board, employed by OPW, with the name of John McKeown. John is here today, and I'd say, John, if it weren't for him, we would be very, we wouldn't have been able to complete the canal because it needed the expertise of Waterways Ireland to do the job. John, thank you very much. So I think I'll leave it at that there. Shin scale Ella. There's in relation to let somebody else talk about that, John, right? I could go on for hours and hours and hours, right? Just to say, good and meal and Margaret Galer. Thank you very, very much, everybody.
Okay, we're going to move on now, and since Waterways was mentioned, we have a gentleman from Waterways who's going to say a few words now about their input. As Noel has already said, I'm from Maynooth, and we were involved in Maynooth, and we were looking to build a slipway and a harbour in Maynooth, and only for the same man, John McKeown, it wouldn't have happened, because I think Waterways at the time were just thinking of running canals straight through the whole lot. But it's down to John that we have a fantastic harbour in Maynooth, and harbours and facilities down along the canal. So I'll call on Éanna Rowe, Waterways Ireland, to say a few words.
Accorda, is mór an bheith an sáil libh inniu, agus muid den a clúra an éach de rinne Ian Bath agus an RCAG son muide in Uisce Valley Éireann ach ar son na hÉireann comá. Ladies and gentlemen, Chair, Noel, friends, colleagues, and indeed the Bath family, I'm absolutely delighted to be here to represent Waterways Ireland and to speak at this momentous occasion where we mark, in a very appropriate way, I think, the symbol of a heron and the commemoration of the work that Ian Bath and his colleagues in the RCAG have achieved. I feel like a bit of a fraud here also, because the expert in Waterways Ireland is standing in front of me. His name has already been mentioned, but John McKeown's passion and enthusiasm to take on the work and build on the work that the RCAG and Ian in particular did was second to none. I've listened to John wax lyrical about the Royal Canal and sometimes sing about it also, but mainly talk about the Royal Canal and the passion that he had for its restoration. We often consider that the work that Ian and the RCAG did was a catalyst to how we have always behaved since then when it comes to restoration of waterways. We're currently in the throes of trying to restore the Ulster Canal, and we often reference how we approached the Royal Canal and its restoration. And not only has Ian left us a legacy of this wonderful navigation, but the navigation now has been built on, and we now have an excellent greenway running from the Shannon and hopefully right into the heart of the city very soon. So Accorda, it's my privilege and my pleasure to represent Waterways Ireland here today, to acknowledge Ian and not only the legacy that he left us here with the Royal Canal, but also the legacy that he left us in donating his vast archive to our own archive. It's available on our website, and I think that as well is a lovely legacy that everybody can access from right across the world. It would be remiss of me also not to remember his partner in crime in many ways, and that's Ruth Delaney, who has just passed recently. Again, Ruth was an exemplar of how to keep our waterways alive, keep them animated, keep them as attractors, and more importantly, save the heritage that are our waterways. So I'd like to remember Ruth today as well, if I can. So Accorda, I'll not say any more, only to thank you again for inviting me to speak here and to wish you all the best in the RCAG. We've been friends since the 70s, and I hope we continue on that path. So gur míle maith agaibh.
Okay.
Oh. Okay, we have one more speaker, and he's going to round it all up. Derek Whelan. Derek has been the main mover behind this project. He's done a huge amount of work, and really at times it wouldn't have progressed only for his enthusiasm and his dedication to seeing the job done. He found the sculptor, and I have to say he's done very well. So Derek Whelan.
It's my very pleasant duty to wrap it all up. It's been a big project. For the RCAG, it's been the biggest thing I think we've ever embarked on. And it came into being because of various people. First of all, I want to mention the Bath family, who, when we first put the idea to them of celebrating Ian's life, were fully behind the idea and have been ever since. In the initial discussion we had with Grania, a heron was mentioned, and that is the theme we've gone with, and I think we're quite right. The second group of people who kind of kicked off the whole thing was the former Tidy Towns Committee of Blanchardstown, who many, many years ago, about 30 years ago, collected money for an artwork to place in the village. Various things got in their way and they never achieved their objective, but they were the first people to contribute a very large sum of money to this project when it got going. Our friends and colleagues in the IWAI, of which I've been a member for 40 years, rallied round and supported us, both the Dublin branch and the Royal Canal branch further out, in making all this happen. We were also helped by people from our own members from the RCAG throughout the country, and I'm very happy to say that we now have something to show everybody, because up to now it was an idea. What's it going to be like? What does it mean? We now have the real thing. Finally, I would like to mention a few people that I'm delighted to see here today. John McKeown's already been mentioned, and along with Ian Bath, he was the main person who brought the Royal Canal back into restoration. I'm also delighted to see Rita Thornbury here today with us, because her husband, he's over there behind Éine, her husband was on the original committee of the RCAG back in the 70s. It's nice to have a link with that, with the start of the whole operation.